if you are sick or feeling unwell, to come and get tested. This is a really important message, and so far we're having those over 7,000 tests. People are doing the right thing, but we absolutely want people, especially over the next 2 to 3 days, to come forward and get tested if you are feeling unwell and you have symptoms.
Tonight, breaking news: Queensland on COVID alert. New restrictions imposed after a new case of coronavirus. We'll have team coverage of our reporters on the ground in Brisbane and with the latest developments on how this affects the AFL. It's Sunday the 28th of March. You're watching 6 News also tonight.
Just as we have stood with people, whether through COVID, whether through bushfires, whether through drought, floods, tornadoes, cyclones, we're of course going to stand here with the people of the Mid-North Coast.
The clean-up continues after heavy floods across New South Wales and Queensland, with the PM announcing small business grants for those affected. Multiple confirmed dead, and the rain set to hit again next week. And later, have you ever seen this clip?
Good evening. First tonight, our special report on the Boroondara Council's treatment of the Smart Street Reserve Park.
Well, in case you haven't realised, that's me, and that's the very first edition of 6 News back in 2019, under a different name, of course. And on our 2-year anniversary tonight, we'll look back at some of what we've been covering since then and what's changed. I'm going to tell you quite a lot, including what I'm wearing when presenting. You can see here we've got a nice little tie, but it was a bit different back then. We'll have a look at all those changes a little later in the bulletin. A very good evening to you, though. Thanks for joining us. We do begin with breaking news tonight, and Brisbane is on COVID alert after a 26-year-old man spent a week in the community while infected with the highly contagious UK strain of coronavirus. Genomic sequencing has confirmed it is linked with an earlier case at the Princess Alexandra Hospital. With more than a dozen exposure sites stretching across at least 7 suburbs, the state's chief health officer is concerned that this singular case could become a cluster. Chief Reporter Connor Alforque has the latest developments on the ground from Brisbane.
Just on the other side of the road, a couple of metres behind me, is Brisbane's RBWH Hospital. Inside, that 26-year-old man from Stafford, north of Brisbane, who tested positive, is being treated for mild symptoms. Outside, dozens of people are lining up to get tested. They're heeding the advice of the government that if you've been to the exposure sites or have any symptoms, to get tested. Testing rates have tripled, and as such we're seeing long lines across southeast Queensland. There are wait times of up to 6 hours in some places, and it's no doubt deterred people from getting tested.
People are not social distancing. We really need people to social distance. And the other thing that's coming back is everyone is doing handshakes again. Please, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. Now is not the time to break our social distancing, our good hand hygiene, and the handshake. So I'm sorry everyone, but we need to abide by these things if we're going to get through this.
There is a general sense of unease here in Brisbane following the announcement on Friday of that new case of community transmission, the state's first in 13 days. What's worried doctors and the community the most is that the 26-year-old had been out in the community while infectious for about a week. And to make matters worse, genomic sequencing has revealed that he has the highly contagious UK strain. It's also revealed a link with a previous case earlier this month at the Princess Alexandra Hospital. Exposure sites are scattered across 7 suburbs and over a dozen locations, from shopping centres to supermarkets and restaurants and a hardware store, putting the city on a heightened alert. And that list is only expected to grow, with one close contact testing positive yesterday, a man from the North Brisbane suburb of Strathpine.
We are not seeing large-scale community transmission. This is the close contacts. We're very comfortable where we are at the moment.
But the Premier has stopped short of locking down the city, in keeping with Dr Jeanette Young's promise that only vulnerable people would be locked down. And that's exactly what's happened here. Visitors are barred from aged care facilities, hospitals, disability accommodation and prisons in the Brisbane and Moreton Bay regions. Despite the government recommending the use of masks in crowded spaces, few people seem to be wearing them. As the anxious wait continues for Queensland and those people in the RBWH getting tested as well.
Connor, our 4K reporting there, and meanwhile there have been lots of concerns about just how this affects the AFL after Brisbane Lions fans were sensationally asked to leave GMHBA Stadium minutes before their blockbuster clash against Geelong. Our reporter Lincoln Holmes was there filming this minutes after security ordered out hundreds from the ground in what's been labelled an extraordinary move on social media. Senior reporter Darby Travers has been following this story all weekend. He's got the latest.
Good evening. Well, the AFL has been thrown into absolute chaos following a number of new COVID-19 cases in Brisbane. Just moments before the Cats and the Lions were set to go head-to-head, the Victorian government declared anyone who has been in Brisbane from March 12th must isolate and get a COVID-19 test. The game was allowed to go ahead, but two Channel 7 commentators, Luke Hodge and Wayne Carey, had to leave as a precaution in a move that's been slammed online. Messages repeating the government's advice for Brisbane travellers to isolate were broadcast on GMHBA Stadium's big screens, as you can see there, while it was also covered extensively on Channel 7 and Fox's broadcast. Now, New South Wales Health has urged anyone who has arrived from Queensland recently to follow health advice from authorities, while in WA, anyone who has arrived from Queensland since March 20th must get tested and self-isolate immediately. It's expected that restrictions both locally and nationally will soon follow.
And don't forget, for our continuing coverage of the pandemic, simply head to 6newsau.com/coronavirus. Meanwhile, dozens of people are still tonight cleaning up from the flood disaster in New South Wales, with the PM announcing small business grants of up to $50,000 and up to $75,000 for primary producers affected. Residents in 60 local government areas in the state are now eligible for disaster recovery payments of $1,000 per child and for $1,000 per adult, and $400 per child. Here's some of what officials had to say.
We'll be able to support small business grants for those directly impacted, and John can speak more to that, of up to $50,000, and importantly, primary producer grants of up to $75,000. Now, those $75,000 grants are critical for those producers to get back up on their feet, but no, we are backing them in, and that we will be there to help them restock and rebuild and get their machinery up and running again, and be able to get their operations up and running again.
It has been a team effort, and we know that New South Wales and Australia always does better when we work together, and I again want to thank the Prime Minister and his team for all the support we've received, and I also want to, more than anything, thank the community for restoring our faith in good citizenship and restoring our faith in helping one another. And no matter where I've gone today, I've just been struck by people saying thank you to each other, even though they're going through the most horrible time.
And this comes as the clean-up continues in both New South Wales and Queensland, with multiple tonight confirmed dead, but it doesn't look like the wet weather will be going away anytime soon. We'll have a full forecast later in the bulletin. PM Scott Morrison has slammed Clive Palmer for distributing flyers that question the speed of the development of the COVID-19 vaccines, labelling it complete rubbish. The mining magnate and former politician has claimed that appropriate safety checks and balances have not been carried out. Labor has now urged the Australian Electoral Commission to investigate Mr Palmer regarding the flyers, which are in the colours of his party, the United Australia Party, although there is no mention of them on those posters. Claims have also been posted to his social media accounts, as you can see there, which is labelled an urgent communication. He also posted a video that shows Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk receiving the flu vaccination, which, yes, does feature the cap on, but that's because it was a reenactment at the media's request. In fact, this is actually an old story. It happened in April last year. So again, it was the flu shot, not the COVID-19 vaccine. And of course, for more fact-checking of politicians, the media, and much more, head to 6newsau.com/fact-checking. A Victorian school has apologised after asking all male students to stand up in an assembly to apologise for their gender. Schools from Brea College in Warrnambool were asked to stand in a quote-unquote symbolic gesture of apology during a whole school assembly discussing respect for women this week following the National March for Justice, but the move was slammed by many parents as inappropriate.
My main concern is that, my son doesn't have a bad bone in his body, really, and for him to think that everybody's looking at him as if he's some kind of bad child or bad person that's intent on doing these things that he's seen in this video is upsetting.
I guess the concern is that these are the schools that will be in charge of teaching the kids about relationships and consent.
Yes,
if they think this is appropriate, how do they teach the kids?
That's it, and that's my concern for the time being, and that's why I put up a post as soon as I seen it, because unfortunately on Wednesday I was actually in having surgery, so I had no idea about it until Thursday morning when I've finally sort of woken up and my son's told me about it, and I've seen it on Facebook, and I'm like, well, that's really not appropriate. I'm like, did the girls get up and apologise to you guys?
Principal Jane Boyle later released a statement saying while the move was, quote, well intended, they recognised that part of the assembly was inappropriate. Shipping rates for oil product tankers have nearly doubled as several vessels continue to be diverted away from the Suez Canal, which right now is blocked by a massive ship. The 400-metre container ship, the Ever Given, remains stuck, as experts warn it could take weeks to free it due to bad weather and, of course, the ship's massive size. Now, for reference, if we look at this image here, this ship is larger than the Statue of Liberty. It's larger than the Eiffel Tower. In fact, it's around the same size as the Empire State Building, so effectively we are trying to move the Empire State Building from this really tight positions, and of course oil prices have been heavily impacted. We've got more on that on our website, 6newsau.com. At least 32 people are dead and dozens more injured after two trains collided in southern Egypt. Video shows twisted piles of metal with passengers covered in dust trapped inside, with one even heard shouting, "Help us, people are dying." Dozens of ambulances rushed to the scene around 440 kilometres south of the capital, Cairo, and the injured were taken to 4 nearby hospitals. Railway authorities say someone may have activated the emergency brakes on the front passenger train, causing it to be rear-ended by another train. Egypt's deadliest train crash was back in 2002 when more than 300 people were killed after a fire broke out on a train travelling from Cairo to southern Egypt. North Korea has confirmed it's launched several ballistic missiles, the first time the country has done that since Joe Biden was inaugurated back in January. The US military and intelligence community is right now still analysing the data from the test launch to determine what kind of missile was fired and how far it exactly went. State media said the quote-unquote new type tactical guided projectiles accurately hit their target off the eastern coast on Thursday, with photos showing the missile lifting off. The launches come after North Korea carried out a weapons test last weekend, launching 2 projectiles. A Brazilian man with an upside-down head has reportedly tested positive for COVID-19. 44-year-old Claudio Vieira de Oliveira suffers from a rare condition that has left his head turned all the way back and his arms stuck by his chest, but now he's had to isolate at home after reportedly contracting the virus. Brazil is now top 300,000 confirmed COVID-19 deaths, becoming the second country in the world to do so, even as President Jair Bolsonaro pushes for the end of restrictions. Tasmania will head to the polls on May the 1st after Premier Peter Gutwein declared an election following Speaker Sue Hickey's effective sacking from the Liberal Party. The election is set to be the first time Mr Gutwein faces voters as Premier, who told reporters that now more than ever Tasmania needed a strong, stable majority government.
My team and I have been decisive and we've held firm during the COVID-19 crisis, and together with Tasmanians, we've helped Tasmania become one of the safest places in the world. On the other hand, Labor are indecisive, have no plan, and we all know that they will do a deal with the anti-everything Greens if there is a hung Parliament. just like they did last time. Look, I won't govern in minority. Give that very clear commitment.
Or in a coalition.
I will give a very clear commitment that I will govern in majority or not at all. Now, under the previous Premier, Will Hodgman, we saw what minority government prior to him becoming Premier could do. We had a recession. 10,000 jobs in Tasmania were lost at the peak. Mr Hodgman then formed a majority government, and since then, over the last 7 years, 26,000 jobs have been created. We've had one of the fastest growing economies in the country. Tasmania has been confident. That's the Tasmania that I want to see.
Gutman also denied he had acted out of self-interest, with opposition leader Rebecca White set to deliver a baby in June, saying he gave a quote-unquote great deal of thought to that matter. We'll be following the campaign 24/7 on our website, of course, 6newsau.com. Well, today is a huge day for all of us at 6 News because it's our 2-year anniversary. Now, for those of you who don't know, we began back in 2019 as HMV Local News, covering news from the Hawthorn district here in Melbourne, but we rebranded in early 2020 and have since expanded to have reporters in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and even the US. So let's take a look back at our very first broadcast from around the same time back in 2019, March 2019. I can promise you, though, it isn't going to be as good as the quality as we have now. Take a look.
Tonight, our special report on the Smart Street Reserve Park as the Boroondara Council still doesn't respond to growing pressure. Now we dive deeper into the story. Also, it's back. Hawthorn West Primary confirms rumours that science will be going ahead in Term 2. The fence is gone, but so is the garage. We cross live to one Hawthorn reporter as the super safe incident is finally cleared up. And an exclusive as a car goes up in smoke at a Formula 1 practice session. This is HMV Local News with Leonardo Puglisi. Good evening. First tonight, our special report on the Boroondara Council's treatment of the Smart Street Reserve Park.
And you can see there I didn't exactly have a auto cue or even memorising the script. I think I said good evening. I didn't even say that. I was already looking down at that little notepad I had there. Nowadays we do have a proper auto cue and a proper system which really helps us deliver the news a lot faster and a lot better. Now, a bit further into the future, here's a bulletin that aired on the 29th of March 2020, so a year and a day back from today. Take a look at this. Tonight, did Hawthorn West Primary School deliberately cover up a second case of coronavirus? Some angry parents say yes. Despite warnings from the PM,
that is not who we are. Stop it.
Panic buying continues around the nation and we don't know when it will stop. And are Melburnians taking social distancing seriously? Our undercover footage says they're not. 6 News starts now. Good evening, let's get straight to that developing story out of Hawthorn West Primary School, where major allegations are coming into our newsroom tonight that the school deliberately covered up a second case of coronavirus. So, story's pretty similar to today, all about COVID-19. Now, if you're wondering, that was filmed during Victoria's first lockdown when it wasn't stage 4 restrictions, stage 3 I believe. Still though, very different times now. And of course, if you want to see more old clips, just go to our YouTube channel, 6 News Australia, go to videos and just click sort by oldest. And you can see a lot of retro clips, so to speak. Of course, that's back in 2019. So again, 2 years old today. Very happy birthday to us. Now to tomorrow's forecast right across the country. For tomorrow, Brisbane showers a top of 27, 21 in Sydney, 20 and sunny in the nation's capital, 18 in Melbourne, 17 in Hobart, 24 in Adelaide, 29 in Alice Springs, 31 in Perth, and a little bit hotter in Darwin. Heavy rain, a top of 32. And that is 6 News for this very busy Sunday evening. You can stay up to date with the latest news by heading to our website 6newsau.com and by following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok and Liz. Just search 6 News AU to find us. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.